Well, hello everybody. I'm just so excited to present this video, today because it's something which strikes me as rather remarkable, and I think it offers an explanation as to what actually happened at Salem. Salem, 20 people executed because these girls started bad-mouthing the people on the other side of town, saying they appeared to them in visions and stuff, and they were actually witches. And the people who did the executing, on the one hand, they were stupid. On the other hand, they were actually quite smart people, as we will find out. And this intrigues me. What's going on? So we're going to actually argue that all periods of dark ages, and this was a kind of mini dark age in America, are actually triggered by astronomical level things like the sun. And we're going to explain how that works. We're going to look at different things. We're going to look at ghosting, what's causing the ghosting. And I believe that the sun during periods of low sunspot activity is failing to deliver the projection, which is life, to Earth. And this is causing the appearance of apparitions, ghosts, which increases this kind of activity in times of low sunspot activity. And we're going to get into this. This explains, this proved electric universe. It proves so many things. And we're going to look at these historical mysteries. Okay, let's get started. I mean, these girls were saying that there were multiple persons, multiple versions of people who were alive, i.e. ghosts, were appearing to them. I mean, it's just unbelievable. So let's get into it. And of course, the whole projection theory that Elon Musk was going on about, it's all about the idea of somewhere in the universe is projecting beams of light or beams of information, and the pixels get spread out. And this explains why, say, 3 celebrities die at the same time. And they're similar. They're in similar fields because they're actually, they're almost like pixels being coated across one area. And that's essentially projection theory. And let's look at this other example. This is the example of the Battle of Edgehill. And you're not going to believe what happened here. Hey, this is Charles I. Charles I is sitting here, and he's directing where his royal fort. He was on his way to London, but the parliamentarians were blocking him, saying, "You shall not pass." And he's saying, "No, well, I am the king, so let's have a war." So they had a civil war. And the Battle of Edgehill was fought inconclusive, and people went home. Or did they? See, the thing is, the following weekend, some shepherds thought there was a battle going on in the same place. And they saw the whole battle playing out before them in full colour with all the sounds. And this happened again and again. And eventually, Charles I, hard-pressed as he was in his war, he sent a team of 6 to investigate what the hell was going on at Edgehill. And these people who were there, the battle was played out for them as well, and they saw everything. And they were some of his loyalist commanders, and they recognized that some of the ghosts that were being played in the battle, these are recording ghosts. And guess what? Although some of them were dead, some of them were actually still alive in other parts of England. So, are ghosts actually of the dead? Or are they something else? We're going to explain it. Grey Ladies. And it's actually this book here that I get the following information from, Ghost Hunter's Handbook by Herbie Brennan. He says grey ladies are not necessarily ghosts of the dead. They appear in old houses and things, going up staircases. They're in several movies. They basically play out the same scene over and over and over and over. But he says they actually fade away with time. And one grey lady, which appeared initially in red, a few decades later, she appeared to the startled recipients of the vision in pink. And then eventually she was grey, so the colours do fade out. So they are localised in space and time. They're like a shadow, a projection, an image, a shadow around a central focus. So it's an image out of focus with diffraction rings around it. And the Salem witch trial is absolutely extraordinary. And many of the judges were old. They didn't quite live to see the outrage, but they were doing crazy things. Why were they doing such crazy things? Sensible people doing crazy things, such as they put rocks all over this person because he refused to enter a plea, and he died rather than enter a plea because he thought they'd all gone mad. But the thing is, why had they gone mad? This doesn't make any sense. And in the 19th century, they were laughing about this. So this girl gets the visions, and the judge is, "Oh my goodness," and and this guy's about to draw his sword. So they're all laughing at these people in the 19th century. This is 1892 from an English, an English newspaper. And so why did they believe in one era, but not in another era, and not even 11 years later? I mean, later on, everyone tried to forget that this had even happened. All the girls, only one of the girls apologized, and the other ones were married off, and they didn't want to talk about it. And all the other judges didn't want to talk about it, except for one. So this was going on in Salem, and this guy was a preacher in Boston, and he took an active interest in the trials, and his name was Cotton Mather's. And what happened was during one of the executions, one of the men who was being executed, he got up and he said, "I'm completely innocent," and he recited the Lord's Prayer, and he recited it so well that the crowd almost intervened to stop the execution. But he was executed anyway. And this guy afterwards, he tried to placate the crowd, and he said, "Well, actually, the angel or the devil can appear as an angel of light. So do not fear that we have executed an innocent person." And he believed in this. And guess what? He was a scientist. This guy was a scientist. He was in a university. He invented inoculation 80 years before Jenner and Lister in England. He said that we can inoculate smallpox. People laughed at him. 100 years before. He did Mendel-like experiments hybridizing plants. Who knows what else he did? And he supported the trials. It doesn't make any sense. So there must be something to it. So what is going on? And some people have said, it's the plants. Oh, there was a fungus, and the fungus gave hallucinations, the pinprick feelings, the poisoning. Yeah, look, that's one possibility, and that could be included in all this. But I think we're looking at a much bigger phenomenon, because they were burning witches in Europe as well. Was the fungus everywhere? And of course, very clever people were putting out pamphlets. Cotton Mather himself put this one out, Wonders of the Invisible World. And he said we need to look at the spectral evidence, the ghost evidence. We need to take this into consideration. He was a scientist. And he supported the trials. Unbelievable. I mean, if it was just ignorant people, I would say, okay, it's just idiots. But this guy was smart. So what's going on? And this guy here, only 5 years after, you know what he did? He was a judge, Samuel Sewall, and only 5 years after, he denounced himself. He went into a Boston church, he said, "I'm guilty. They were all innocent." He was one of the judges at Salem. His family had started suffering a curse. 2 of his daughters died. He thought this was a curse on him. He read a passage in Matthew that said, "You will not condemn innocence." So he thought, uh-oh. Only a few years later, everything changed. And now we're going to explain all of this, by looking at the sun. Because it is a fact that some recording ghosts, grey ladies, they do appear year after year after year at the same time. Or, for example, that battle on Edgehill, it was replayed every Saturday night, Sunday. It was like a Saturday night TV. Every Saturday, Sunday, it was replayed. Hell, even Melusine in the last video, she had to bathe every Saturday night. So there's something happening with an astronomical iteration going on an astronomical level. So the sun is involved. And that's a great book on the electric universe. I really do think the electric universe is going to put conventional cosmology to shame within the next decade. There are going to be scientists appearing, and this will be taught in universities. And one of the things that's covered in this book is something from one of Hans Alfven's papers, who is, I guess, the main champion of the electric universe. He's dead now, but he was a Nobel Prize winner. And he said that there's a cosmological, he called this a cosmological pendulum going on between empiricism and mysticism. And he says that things such as the Big Bang Theory, Eddington, all this, it's all mysticism because it's mathematics done on the blackboard. So, for example, Pythagoras took us to mysticism, Plato, etc. Then the invention of the telescope took us back to a practical sort of knowledge. So this is actually a posteriori knowledge gained from experiment. And this is a priori knowledge gained from thinking about it. So essentially, this is science and that's philosophy. So the invention of telescope took us to science, Newton and Maxwell. Maxwell's equations took us to Einstein's equations, and then it all became equations-oriented, the theory of relativity. And it went back into this time period, Eddington, Big Bang, etc., and everyone doing maths on the blackboard because they all wanted to be another Einstein. They all had a tremendous ego. They wanted people to say, wow, what a genius. That blackboard is full of chalk dust. And then, of course, the invention of the spacecraft might have taken us back into an empirical age. But then, of course, I don't think Alfven is with us anymore. So we don't know how he would have continued this. But as you can see, we are flipping possibly between Dark Ages and the Age of Light. And I think that's astronomical. And it happened in ancient history as well. You look at someone like Cicero. Cicero, amazing scientist. Amazing. And it went from the type of Roman Enlightenment to St. Augustine. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? But then it happened with the Library of Alexandria as well. The library, it was no longer socially appropriate to have a library. It was burned down once in the High Roman ages by Caesar, by accident. But then again, twice more in later times because on purpose they didn't like books. So what's going on? And it was even the clever people who didn't like the books. And I'll prove it right now. Edward Gibbon, who wrote Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, said that part of the reason for the Romans' decline was their obsession with mysticism and superstition, which increased in later ages. And they retreated into mysticism, and they lost their martial spirit of earlier ages because they put everything down to a higher power. So, Neoplatonism is an extension of Plato, which is essentially that we're doing everything in our mind. Socrates ranting away in the agora, harassing people, but he never actually doing any scientific experiments. So these Neoplatonists, if you read it, it'll give you a massive headache because you can't even I can't understand what they're writing about. It's ridiculous. Because we don't even have our glossaries to explain all the terminology they use. Criticised by Gibbon, but they were very clever, and he said these people the Romans wanted to retreat into the invisible world instead of fighting in the real one. So, information from thought alone, idealism essentially, idealistic philosophy, which is we live in the mind of spirits, similar to Socrates, and hanging out in the agora, and not reading. And now we're going to come to actually how it all comes together, I hope. And of course, this is all my theory, just ideas. They don't have to be true. Ghosting on the TV. If we are a projection, as so many claim, this can explain ghosts and can explain why you don't have to be dead to have a ghost, a doppelganger, for example. We are being projected. And a magnetic field is what directs the projection. And what's the biggest magnetic field around? Well, it is sunspots. And here's the thing. It's been correlated. These are sunspots. When sunspots improve, the economy, the Dow Jones in this case, tends to swing up. And when sunspots decline, the Dow Jones tends to go down. So Dark Ages are a period of economic decline when people don't have time to employ authors and book writers and all this sort of thing. But it's also it's also a period of warfare. It's a period of hardship. But it's all driven by the sun. And if you look at that Battle of Edge Ridge, it happened about here. And if you look at the witch trials, it happened about here. But there was an improvement in the situation, and suddenly what happened was, and these could be little peaks here, what happened was, suddenly a few years after the witch trials, during one of these peaks, everyone denounced it and said it was rubbish. But during the witch trials here, when it was a clear minimum, nothing was happening. And these people were silent. So were these people, was this time of a time of high ghosting activity because a magnetic field was interfering with the projection coming from another source in the universe. And what are sunspots? Well, they're just aren't they just poles of the sun? The sun's multipolar. These look like poles to me. So the more sunspots, the more magnetic activity is evident on the sun. So that means the more direction, the more control, the more order, because electric universe people believe that order is being imposed in the universe by the electric fields. And that's why non-electric universe people can't explain why the universe has so much order. Let's face it, it's incredibly ordered. So to summarize, what's happening, I think, is there's a point of projection, And then the solar field is modulating what we get from that projection. And it does this with solar magnetism, and this is expressed visually as sunspot activity. So, and this is expressed as order. So the more sunspots, the more order of that projection, the more coherent the image, the less ghosts. But of course, in dark ages like this, the sunspots vanish and there's less order, so more ghosting can possibly occur. So then you have a mass ghosting if the field allowing entry of the projection into the solar area is disrupted. So less sunspots make a solar field weaker, which results in a dark age. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Please leave your comments, and thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye. Take care.